There was one thing that happened to me in the 80s, besides Knight Rider and Baywatch, was the Berlin Wall. When I sang on the Berlin Wall in 1989 to a million people.
Imagine growing up with a dream that feels too wild to ever be real, only to wake up one day and realize the world finally caught up to your imagination. That's exactly what happened with David Hasselhoff and the car that would define his legacy. Back in the early 80s, the idea of a talking car seemed like a kid's fantasy. But decades later, everything about that dream machine, self-driving, voice control, onboard computers, has become real. And yet, there was one eerie rule nobody could explain. Each of those iconic vehicles had to be destroyed once filming wrapped. Only Hasselhoff knew the truth behind that decision. While Knight Rider was dominating television screens, behind the scenes, Hasselhoff was facing a very different reality, one far removed from the glowing red scanner on the hood of KIT. Personal struggles began to surface, and those closest to him couldn't ignore it. His addiction quietly started to spiral during the height of the show's success. Years later, one of his daughters would capture a heartbreaking moment, filming him in a vulnerable state that painted a much darker picture than the one seen on screen. The glossy exterior of Knight Rider masked the inner chaos. But to truly understand David Hasselhoff's journey, we have to rewind to the beginning. Born July 17, 1952, in Baltimore, Maryland, Hasselhoff grew up in a household rooted in discipline and tradition. His father, a corporate executive, kept the family moving from one state to another, Florida, Georgia, Illinois, always chasing the next opportunity. Young David was constantly the new kid in school, and it was in those repeated restarts that he learned to adapt, to speak up, and eventually to perform. The quiet, awkward boy slowly became a natural showman, shaped by years of reinventing himself in unfamiliar places. One moment changed everything. At just 7 years old, he was cast as a background pirate in a local production of Peter Pan. The stage transformed him. For the first time, he wasn't the outsider. He was the spotlight. That moment ignited a lifelong passion for performance. He chased it relentlessly, enrolling in acting, singing, and dancing lessons, dreaming of Broadway. And decades later, he made a full circle, returning to Peter Pan, this time donning Captain Hook's coat in productions across the UK from 2010 to 2017. In his teens, Hasselhoff settled in Illinois and quickly became a standout at Lyons Township High School. He didn't just participate, he led. Choir leader, speech team champ, star of school plays. By graduation, he had more stage hours than many young professionals. After briefly attending Oakland University, he transferred to CalArts, Disney's brainchild for training versatile performers. It was a perfect match. There, he learned to merge his talents across disciplines and prepared for the industry waiting just outside Hollywood's gates. Sometimes, you have to stumble to get noticed. In 1974, desperate for his SAG card, Hasselhoff took a cringeworthy role in a low-budget comedy, thinking no one would ever see it. The film resurfaced under the title, Caught with Their Pants Down. Embarrassing? Sure. But it worked. He was officially in the union, officially a working actor. That same year, the game changed. He was cast as Dr. Snapper Foster in The Young and the Restless, and for 6 years, he became a daytime TV mainstay. Fans adored the reliable, good-hearted doctor. When he left in 1982, the show's creators didn't just let him go, they phased out the entire family storyline. That's how significant he'd become. Then, like something out of a movie pitch, NBC's Brandon Tartikoff had a wild idea. What if the star of the show wasn't a person, but a car? Knight Rider was born. It was part action, part science fiction, and entirely different from anything on air. Hasselhoff's Michael Knight wasn't just chasing criminals. He was restoring hope, one mission at a time. And audiences connected deeply to that message. Before he climbed into the futuristic Trans Am, there was a detour. In 1979, Hasselhoff took a role in Star Crash, an Italian knockoff of Star Wars. He played a galactic prince in glowing armor. The film flopped, but his willingness to take risks was clear. And soon, those risks paid off. Once Knight Rider launched in 1982, it became an overnight sensation. But pulling it off wasn't easy. Pontiac Trans Ams weren't easy to come by. At first, the team had one single car. Then luck struck. A train wreck damaged dozens of brand-new Trans Ams, and GM sold 10 of them to the show for $1 each. The catch? Every car had to be scrapped after filming. Fans still call that decision a tragedy. Each version of KITT had its own role. One was pristine for close-ups. Others were stripped down for high-speed chases or stunts. The jump cars had fiberglass bodies and could survive bone-rattling landings. By Season 3, the design evolved. New spoilers, new lights, new mystique. It wasn't just a prop anymore, it was a cultural icon. At a time when cars didn't talk or think, KIT was a glimpse into the future. And that future was closer than anyone realized. Decades later, real automakers began catching up. Ford rolled out heart rate monitoring seats. Collision detection systems became common in trucks. What seemed like science fiction in the 1980s became standard by 2015. KIT was more than a car. It was a prophecy on wheels. The numbers were wild. Each build cost about $100,000. But in fans' minds, it was priceless. Toys flew off shelves. Christmas of 1983 belonged to KIT. Critics rolled their eyes. TV Guide gave it 21%. Rotten Tomatoes wasn't much kinder. But audiences didn't care. They saw hope, excitement, and a hero with a car that talked back. When Knight Rider ended in 1986, it didn't really end. Reruns played across the globe. Hasselhoff became a superstar, especially in Germany. NBC tried to reboot the series in 2008, but they couldn't recapture the soul of the original. And Hasselhoff knew it. For him, Knight Rider wasn't a show. It was a mission. Fans often approached him saying, "You got me through something hard." That meant more to him than any award. It wasn't about explosions or chases. It was about saving lives, even if just metaphorically. The magic of KITT wasn't all movie tricks. Some of it was sheer human risk. To make that Trans Am appear to drive itself, stunt genius Jack Gill would contort himself inside the floorboard, hidden from view, piloting the car while lying on his back. No CGI, no green screen, just nerves of steel and inches to spare. Pontiac had only given them 3 cars to begin with. Then came a twist out of nowhere. A train derailment in 1983 dumped dozens of new Trans Ams off the rails. GM offered 10 to the show, $1 each. The catch? Every last one had to be scrapped after filming wrapped. And they were. Crushed and destroyed like disposable props. What happened to those cars is still a sore spot for fans. Each version of KITT had its role. Some were rigged for close-up glamour shots with gleaming panels and flashing lights. Others were stripped down for stunt scenes. The jump cars? Built feather light from fiberglass, just to soar through the air and get wrecked on landing. One of the show's most jaw-dropping stunts involved flinging KITT across an 85-foot canyon in Thousand Oaks, California. The landing was so violent, the license plate flew off in mid-air. A mounted camera cracked on impact, and even Hasselhoff's leather jacket blew off from the shock. That one scene got recycled into 5 later episodes because it was just that unforgettable. But behind the camera, the price was brutal. Jack Gill didn't just coordinate those stunts, he lived them. And he paid dearly. He broke his back twice, his neck once. Now, he walks with a titanium brace in his spine, fastened by 6 screws. For one particularly insane maneuver, Gill had to reverse Kit out of a moving truck doing 50 miles per hour, with only 3 inches of room between the side mirrors. The second the wheels touched the pavement, he had to spin the car 180 degrees and take off like a rocket. No room for error, just the road, the rush, and the real danger. Even Hasselhoff had to learn. Gill trained him at Saugus Speedway, running drills on drifting, fishtails, and hairpin turns until he looked like a natural. Soon enough, Hasselhoff was pulling off most of the driving stunts himself, though never the airborne ones. Those belonged to the stuntmen. But it wasn't just on-set crashes causing sparks. Behind the scenes, egos were colliding too. Gill had designed a way to steer Kit from inside the seat for self-driving scenes, lying in hidden compartments. But Hasselhoff hated not being in control. Tensions flared. Gill would be mid-scene, hidden in the car, when Hasselhoff would slide in shouting, "I'm driving!" Gill would fire back, "No, you're not. I'm already here." He later joked that the best part was being able to elbow the actor from inside the seat whenever he felt like it. And then there was the car's voice, William Daniels. Known later as Mr. Feeney from Boy Meets World, Daniels recorded his lines in a studio after scenes were filmed. He and Hasselhoff didn't even meet until much later, which made their rivalry all the stranger. Hasselhoff noticed how much fans adored Kit, sometimes more than Michael Knight himself. It bugged him. He began lobbying for more dialogue, tweaking scripts, and trying to reclaim center stage. Meanwhile, Daniels treated the role of Kit as sacred. He protected that voice, gave it soul, and shaped its personality long before voice acting was taken seriously. When they finally met at a holiday party, it was weirdly awkward. 2 stars of the same show, strangers in real life. As fame rose, cracks deepened. Hasselhoff's personal battles started bleeding into production. Crew whispered about exhaustion halting shoots, which was code for his struggle with alcohol. The toll became obvious during a key 2-part episode in 1984 called Goliath Returns. Hasselhoff showed up drained most mornings, and the schedule had to flex around his slow recovery. Years later, his ex-wife would reveal how far gone he already was. And in 2007, the world saw it, raw and unfiltered, when a clip surfaced of him barely conscious on the floor, attempting to eat a burger. That wasn't a tabloid moment. That was real pain, exposed. But not all the moments were low. One day, in 1983, a teenage fan named Randy, sick and frail, visited the set. He was battling leukemia. After Randy passed, his parents sent Hasselhoff a letter. That message haunted him. Suddenly, this role of a man who made a difference didn't feel like a performance. It felt like a responsibility. Hasselhoff started pressing the network for deeper stories. Less explosions, more meaning. But the pressure to live up to the clean-cut savior was crushing. He said it nearly broke him. "I had to fall to the bottom," he admitted later, "before I finally understood what life was about." After Knight Rider wrapped in 1986, Hasselhoff hit the kind of wall that buries most stars. Everyone saw him as Michael Knight, the man with the talking car. That image refused to die. Hollywood didn't want him for anything else. Films flopped, doors closed. But when America turned its back, Germany opened its arms. In 1988, he released a cover of a German hit called "Looking for Freedom." It lit a fire. The song hit #1 in West Germany for 2 straight months. And in a time when East and West were still divided, it became more than music. It became a symbol. 1 year later, he performed it on top of the Berlin Wall, surrounded by fireworks, wearing a jacket that lit up like a Christmas tree. 500,000 people sang with him. That wasn't a concert. That was a moment in history. Back home, though, Hasselhoff was still losing momentum. Then came a lifeline. Baywatch. It debuted in 1989 and immediately sank in the ratings. NBC dropped it. Production folded. But instead of walking away, Hasselhoff bet everything. He bought the rights, took over as executive producer, and negotiated a deal that gave him a cut of the profits. What followed was television alchemy. At its height, Baywatch reached over 1 billion viewers across 148 countries. Even more surprising, 65% of its viewers were women, drawn by its emotional arcs and empowering characters. Hasselhoff's Mitch Buchanan became a legend in slow motion. From 1989 to 2001, he starred in 220 episodes. When he finally stepped away, they didn't kill him off. They let him vanish in an underwater explosion, just in case he ever returned. And he did, in 2003's Baywatch Hawaiian Wedding, playing a Mitch who had lost his memory. The red trunks, the lifeguard tower, the legacy, it all came rushing back. Even while his TV success soared, Hasselhoff's fortune was quietly eroding. A divorce would later slash his wealth from $100 million to just $10 million. But thanks to syndication royalties and a global fan base, he kept climbing. In 2018, the original show was remastered in HD, unlocking yet another wave of profits. The brand lived on. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, he remained a music icon. He toured relentlessly through the 80s and 90s, performing in packed German arenas, releasing over 24 albums and compilations. In 1990 alone, he was juggling concert tours, TV production, and global press appearances, often crossing continents in the same week.